to think that by being named Autumn, I would naturally be a great harvester. But I actually really didn't get into plants until after I came home from prison. I remember the day I got out, just gazing out the window the whole 45-minute drive, admiring the color of the grass and the leaves on the trees blowing in the spring wind. The sun was shining so bright, it reflected off the blades of grass. The colors were so vibrant, but it wasn't until then that I realized that this was another one of those simple things that I missed while I was away from the world, away from my family, away from my life. Gardening has been very therapeutic for me, as I've still been healing from my experience of being incarcerated 10 years ago. The cycle of vegetation is much like the cycle of life in society, a lot more than people realize. For example, take a seed, let's say a mustard seed, and plant it in the soil. That seed's life cycle is directly dependent on its environment, its access to nutrition, basic needs, and the other life forms around it. A plant cannot thrive without its basic needs and a supportive environment, and neither can children. When I was locked away in prison, property of the state, I had no responsibilities for myself. But who was responsible for the minor children that I was caretaker of? Being in prison, I was more worried about my children and family left in the community, struggling to get access to their basic needs and the support that they would need to get through that time without me. I had always been the main provider for my family, including supporting my mom and my brother. The day I was taken into custody, the life that my family had always known was completely turned upside down, and it was unnatural, like a plant without its roots. In 2014, I was sentenced to serve 2.5 years at Minnesota Correctional Facility Shakopee. I was 8 months pregnant with Reality, King was 5, and Rain was almost 2. When I was convicted, I nor my family were at all prepared. We had no money saved up, no paperwork signed and put away, nothing. There wasn't any social support or community resources out there to really help my mom, who had just inherited 2 small children and a newborn after years of being an empty nester. I remember thinking, I'm the one who committed the crime, but my children and family were the ones who had to suffer the most. Do you mind telling me in what ways did my incarceration impact your daily life?
I would say financially, obviously, it would be, but my main concern was the structure and the emotional toll that it took on the children.
For me, this came at a time I had recently turned 50 years old. I was living in a one-bedroom apartment, and bringing additional bodies into that one-bedroom apartment was really a challenge. I didn't have the financial support that I needed to take care of the children, successfully take care of the children.
And for me, it wasn't so much financially, but emotionally, watching my grandbaby without a mother, it was rough. It was hard. She didn't have a mother. It was hard.
So let's talk about the day that I had Reality, which was Sunday, June 15th. It was actually Father's Day morning. How did that, like, what was that, what was going through your mind and what were you going through that day? I think she came home on Tuesday, the 17th.
Thought I prepared myself as much as I could for that day, but when I got that call, the anxiety started to rise in me because the whole ride there was just tense and very silent. It was like we were anxious to see the baby and meet the baby, but
We didn't know each other.
right.
We stuck together.
We sure did.
What stigmas or issues did you face because of my incarceration?
My view of it, because I had the oldest child of yours, he had questions, right? It was always, oh, my mom's at school or my mom's at work. And one night he was like, my mom's at school? Who goes to school at nighttime? And I was like, I talked to you like a couple days later, and I was like, I don't know what to say anymore, Autumn. Like, he's asking all these questions, and I keep adding on to this lie, and they were talking about it
talked about
around
him.
him.
Yep.
And that's when he brought it back and said, your mom's not at school, your mom's at jail. And then King came to me and he was like, Titi, this, he was crying and he was like fussing. And I was like, what's going on, nephew? Come talk to me. And then it just came out. I couldn't hide it anymore.
What supportive services would you have liked for you guys as the caregivers?
I don't know. I'm a big holiday person. Holiday things would be great if they did something like that for the families.
You know, they have now what is called guaranteed income programs. These are going on all over the country where they give families an additional $500,000 a month. I think if people knew that they had this, that they would have the support necessary, then less of the children will end up in the system, in the foster care.
The amount of clients who are in jail and have asked me to help find their kids who have been lost in the system since their arrest is truly heartbreaking. It's also unfortunately common how often our clients ask for us to help their families and community find access to safe, affordable housing, medical care, even child care and employment for the caregiver who is taking care of their children. But because of how the laws are set up, there are little to no counties that actually acknowledge the children of incarcerated parents as eligible for social services. I have even seen parents get additional charges for continuing services like food stamps and medical assistance while they were locked up. What do you think happens to a leaf if you pluck it from its vine? Do you expect it to continue to thrive and grow? Of course not. When families lose their foundation, it is extremely difficult for them to cope and to continue to grow without replacing that foundation with the proper support. As a person who has lived through this experience and a professional committed to improving the current system, I have identified some gaps in support that are inducing traumatic experiences for children and increasing the recidivism for incarcerated parents and even caregivers just to survive. What does a plant do when it's in a flourishing environment, but it itself is not flourishing? It steals nutrients from the plants around it. It reminds me of this old African saying, the child who does not feel embraced by the community will burn the community to feel its warmth. It's simple. If we as a community were better at supporting and nurturing impacted families like vulnerable plants, we can help their children continue to thrive and flourish, which prevents burning down the community, the system, and even their direct families. Like my grandma used to tell me, you reap what you sow. So I've had the privilege of knowing you both personally and professionally now for quite some time. But explain to me in your words, how was the experience of when we first met?
I was tasked with like trying to figure out creative ways to bring in the voices of folks that were inside Shakopee Women's Prison to the legislature, right? And we did like 4 back-to-back interviews 2 days in a row. And you were one of those moms that was postpartum. That was the first time we met. And that sort of pushed a whole bunch of work forward.
Because of the conversation, from our conversation and then your follow-up conversation, we all got the medical care that we needed within 24 hours of you leaving that building. What do we know about the impacts of parental incarceration on children?
Part of the impacts are we have to better understand sort of the circumstances around the incarceration and the experiences before the incarceration, and then what's happening during the incarceration, and then how families re-enter and re-navigate relationships. I think partly what the research shows is that like the conditions of the carceral system then layer on stress and harm and trauma for incarcerated folks and the children. Part of our early conversations in 2014 led to legislative changes to limit the use of restraints on pregnant and postpartum people in custody. So that was huge, right? And making sure that restraints aren't used at any point during pregnancy. That law also codified access to doula care. So I think that was huge. And doulas all across the state are doing work directly with children and families every day to improve those family systems.
So what do you think is next? What do you think is next in this work?
It's about taking lessons learned from Minnesota and trying to help people grow similar work in their states in ways that work for them.
Yeah.
I can think about groups in which we've had these losses, or other sites that we're working with where losses happen. And it is so devastating for moms and families and communities. And I think we have to do better.
Too often, our society sees something that is bruised or damaged or even just less than perfect and are ready to discard them like old leaves. I look at my clients and their families like flowers. Some have not been watered enough. Some haven't been given access to enough light. And some just need those little seeds of support to help them blossom on their own. Some of the most common barriers and challenges that families of incarcerated people face is understanding the steps of the criminal justice system for their loved one. There can be simple interventions that reduce stress and trauma of separation, such as coordinating custodial arrangements and aligning caregivers with the resources they need in the community. There are so many low-cost, high-impact tools that we have created, such as reading material and activity books for children, informational resources focused on the needs of impacted family members, and access to phone calls and visits between the families. Correctional staff and providers should be educated on the unique needs of this population, which is something I'm happy to provide. When I came home, I let the stigma and shame keep me from reconnecting with my community. But the community didn't embrace or welcome me back either, because they have been led to believe that people like me want to destroy, disrupt, and demean our community. There was no path laid for me to reconnect with my roots, so it's like I had to replant my entire life. But one thing I knew was that we as a community could do better if we knew better. I became a certified life coach and a family trauma professional in 2019 and a doula in 2020. I came to work with the Minnesota Prison Doula Project in 2021 and have continued to support other birthing communities like the African American Babies Coalition. I have sat as the chair of the Minnesota Department of Corrections Task Force for Justice-Involved Women and Girls and helped advocate for the passing of the Healthy Start Act, which allows the commissioner to grant alternatives to incarceration for pregnant and postpartum people in Minnesota. This act passed on my birthday in 2021. Families impacted by incarceration are all around us. They are our neighbors. They are our friends. They are our sisters. They are our daughters. And they are our mothers. The incarceration rate for women has shot up 200% since 1980, and it doesn't show signs of slowing down now. 2/3 of them are mothers. I want you to see me and my beautiful family and not think of the vibrancy of our family tree, but think about the trauma that nature goes through every season and still turns over into beautiful creatures in the spring. That's why I never really liked when people refer to autumn as fall. Fall sounds so destructive, definitive. But autumn resembles vibrancy, transition, resilience. Because no matter what, with the right support and nurturing, we can all be more fruitful in the next harvest season.